Tyson Fury, why does this keep on happening? Why is it always every time Tyson Fury is involved in a big fight, a super fight, there is always some sort of drama, some sort of drawn out saga? So the big news, which everybody is aware of, is that the undisputed fight between Tyson Fury and Alexander Usyk is now off, as Usyk's promoter is confirmed. And there is so much that has gone on here. Now apparently Usyk is looking to defend his box against Daniel Dubois. We don't know what Fury's going to do. Fury, team Frank Warren are still saying that the fight could be on, but my thing is with this, how many times has Fury done this now? Why is it always involving Tyson Fury? So if we go all the way back to when Tyson Fury beat Vladimir Klitschko, and brilliant win, not easy, but it was a pretty, just a washout from Tyson Fury. He didn't really get touched in that fight. It was clearly one-sided victory, and everybody agreed that. And now the rematch, you remember, was set for Manchester against Vladimir Klitschko. Second fight. Now, I won't go too hard on him on this, simply because we also know the problems that he had at the time, and he may still be going for his problems. This is why I don't like to always. Sometimes what you see is rarely what is the actual case. Just because Fury maybe seems like he doesn't want to fight, or seeming like he's avoiding, it's not really the case. There is probably a something that we don't know. But I can only, at the moment though, I can only go off what's reported, and history tells you, the law of averages will tell you that Tyson Fury has done this time and time again. Vladimir Klitschko, the fight was signed, sealed for Manchester. They had a whole sort of gloves are off thing with Box Nation, I think it was, and it looked like the fight was on. Then Tyson Fury, remember, he was in the fight, then he pulled out, then in and then pulled out, and then eventually the fight just didn't happen. And Klitschko did a video saying that he tried to make the fight, but it just never happened. And that is why everybody knows why Klitschko ended up fighting Anthony Joshua, because they were supposed to fight for the belts. But again, it just didn't happen. And for whatever reason, Tyson Fury said he had an injury during the camp, and that's why. But there's always something with Tyson Fury that leads up to this. Then if we go on, he then makes his comeback after the problems that he had. Beat the likes of Seth Safiri, I think it was Pineta, the other guy he fought. Then he fights Deontay Wilder, and he does amazing in that fight. Won the fight, but obviously they scored it a draw. And then Wilder and his whole team, and even Fury himself, it seemed as if everybody was set for the immediate rematch straight after. They didn't want to end it on a draw. Tyson Fury then signs with Bob Arum, and they decide not to take that immediate rematch. Instead, go the route of fighting in America. Tyson Fury in that time fought the likes of Tom Schwartz, Otto Wallin, did a WWE thing. Deontay Wilder fought Dominic Brazil, fought Luis Ortiz a second time, and their excuse that time was that Wilder needed to get bigger, needed the publicity, more famous. Nobody really knew him in America. And whilst this is true, again, it seemed all set that they were going to fight the second time round immediately after. But no, again, there's a saga, it gets drawn out, and Fast and Fury went a different direction, as did Deontay Wilder. Now, Deontay Wilder did actively smack him out of the fight, but it did good for his publicity and his stock. That case, you can argue, for the fight. And then obviously we know they fought the second time around. Fury beat him. There was talks of them fighting straight after, having the rubber match between the two of them. And then this is where it all kind of turns all over. So Tyson Fury obviously was negotiating with Wilder, and you have to cast your mind back a long way here, because this is a long time. But then they kind of decided at a point to not fight Wilder and actually pursue the Joshua fight instead. And in that sort of fight, they were going to give Wilder a step aside fee. Now, Wilder didn't want this, but they were attempting to sort of almost go through the back door and not fight Wilder, even though, again, you'd have to go back. There was a rematch clause, I'm pretty sure that wasn't stated in that fight, which is why there was such a big thing for it. And as a result, we all remembered, Wilder took Fury and his team to arbitration. Usually, you pay damages if the people win the arbitration, and that is it. In that case, it looked like they ordered the third fight instead. However, again, this is where I really question Fury's team. They knew this arbitration was in the background, and yet they strung everybody along. They said Anthony Joshua fight was gone, it was done, it was sealed. Nothing happened in terms of the negotiations in that fight. It seemed all set. But what happened? I think it was Saudi Arabia. Fury was out posting pics of him and Anthony Joshua. I think they were labeling it the Battle of Britain. They had all this sort of stuff planned out. And what happened? This fight didn't happen. Anthony Joshua himself, remember, was on Twitter saying Tyson Fury, I think he called him a fraud, and said that he wasn't really. He announced the fight, but yet the arbitration was going on in the background. That arbitration never went away. Bob Arum came to in an interview with IFL, even said that apparently they said the arbitration won't be a problem, and yet it was a problem. And for Anthony Joshua, look, say what you want about him and Eddie Hearn. I think you have to be just a complete. You just don't like Anthony Joshua, Eddie Hearn, to blame him for that fight not happening. That fight was in Fury's team's words and in his own words, the arbitration was going to be a problem. And then as soon as the Wilder fight gets announced, as soon as they announce the third one, what happens? Tyson Fury comes out and says, well, everybody knew about the arbitration. And Anthony Joshua himself said to him, if they all knew about arbitration and they knew that was a thing, why announce the fight between Fury and Joshua? It makes no sense. And like I said, Fury, it's always him involved in these type of things. And the fact that they did a weird thing of like signing the contract on camera. Fury didn't really seem bothered by it. He said on TV he doesn't give fighters step aside. He gives them beatings, and he didn't duck him. I mean, this is what I want to also say. There's a term in combat sport that everybody knows. The term ducking, meaning the term ducking, obviously we know means one man doesn't want to fight another man. It was used for Floyd when he fought Manny Pacquiao. Everybody thought Floyd was ducking him. Some people used it for Canelo against Golovkin. Some people use that for Spence and Crawford and vice versa. Some people use that for Joshua Wilder. Like, you could go on for a long, long time. But the term ducking suggests that a fighter doesn't want to fight another fighter. Now, I don't buy this. At the top level, I don't believe anybody is afraid of anybody. I don't believe Fury is afraid of Usyk or Joshua or any of these guys. And I also don't believe the whole, even the whole risk-reward thing. Some people will say they're not afraid of the opponent, but they're maybe afraid of losing, or the risk-reward factor isn't worth it. It's sort of the reason why I believe the likes of Spence or Crawford now won't fight a Boots Ennis or someone like that, because they know the risk-reward factor isn't there. You may beat him, but what do you get out of it? Especially if he hasn't got a name. If he has a name, then it's different. And that's why the Fury and Joshua fight was such a big thing for both guys. It's high risk and high reward, and I think that's what makes that fight so great. I don't think Fury's afraid to fight any of these guys. Clearly not. I think he'd fight everybody. I think he's got a good chance of beating most of these guys. But every single time a big fight happens, this is always the case. And if you want to go to modern day, look at it today. He was set to fight Alexander Usyk. April 29th is what they said. Now, as I'm recording, there's still rumblings of trying to make the fight happen, but Usyk's promoter and his manager, they just seem intent this fight isn't going to happen. From what you hear, initially they wanted first of all, in terms of the split, I personally believe it should be 60-40 to Fury, because Fury is the bigger name, but Usyk does hold a lot of the belts, or majority of the belts. That should give you some leverage. And Fury then proposed a 70-30 split, but then for Usyk, I think case, that means it should be over the 2 fights. They wanted a rematch clause, Usyk's team. Fury also was a proposed 50-50 split, but that would only be across the 1 fight. This is why I often say with Tyson Fury's team, I'm not even going to Tyson Fury himself, it's more his team, because ultimately he doesn't. I don't know how involved in negotiations he is. I don't know how involved most fighters are in negotiations, to be honest with you. Floyd Mayweather, we all knew how involved he was, but other than that, this is why I don't go to fights. I go to teams, I go to promoters. They're the ones who are responsible for making the fight happen. To me, If a fighter wants to fight, another fighter wants to fight, then, in my opinion, you only really have one place to go, and that's the people who make the fights. And for Tyson Fury, again, he's a businessman, but he's not what you would call a savvy businessman, someone who, isn't a, I don't know, like an entrepreneur. He's a fighter who just got rich off of that, and he does a lot of stuff that's entertaining, and it makes people get attracted by him. But he's not somebody who you would think of a shrewd businessman. Anthony Joshua was built in a way that you could say he's a bit of a businessman, but again, he's not really. You look at someone like Conor McGregor, to his credit, he's a bit more of a. If I look at him compared to a lot of these guys, he's with what he did with his proper 12 whiskey and all the other stuff that he's done. You could give him some benefit and say he's quite shrewd, especially when he came from. And in the UFC, where it's very, very hard at the time to get multi millions, he did that. So I think there aren't many fighters in this sport of combat who are really very, very good businessmen. And with Tyson Fury, I just think, again, this is happening too often now. The law of averages would suggest. So if you want to go, it was a Joshua fought or Fury fought Usyk Wilder, right? Let's go through it. The Klitschko fight, he had problems mentally, and he also got an injury during the camp. So maybe you go, okay, it's not his fault. It's just one of those things. Let's let it go. Then we go to the Wilder fight. Wilder, he fought him once, beat him, should have got the win. Then we go into when they were having an immediate rematch, and it doesn't happen. You think, okay, well, maybe he's going for more of a business route. Maybe he will fight Wilder somewhere later down the line. However, at the time, everybody was saying, oh, he was terrified of Wilder. Look at what he did to him in the 12th round, and all this. Then you think, okay, maybe you can go along with it. The Joshua fight, you could say, oh, the arbitration was there, and that was the reason why the fight didn't happen. You can't blame Fury. You can go then. Now you go to the Usyk fight. What's the excuse? How many times are you going to keep giving this guy a pass? The law of averages would suggest if you're involved in what we're talking here, 3 mega fights with Klitschko 2, Wilder 2, and then Usyk, the Usyk fights and the Joshua fights. That's 4 fights actually. Even the law of averages suggests that it's your fault. If this keeps happening constantly, there's always a new reason. And I don't know, I just wonder, like, it's a similar thing with when Frank Warren was dealing with Chris Eubank Jr. trying to make the Saunders 2 fight, and then at the time Eubank Jr. was supposed to fight Golovkin, and he was insistent Frank Warren that fight wasn't going to happen because of how hard the Eubanks are to deal with. In the end, it ended up becoming true. And it's almost like a law of averages. If it happens so many times, and how many times are you going to keep kind of giving these fighters and these teams a pass? To me, eventually, you got to look at somebody. And again, most people are against Tyson Fury on this. Most people are more with Usyk's side, I feel. And again, I think the reason is just because you can't blame Eddie Hearn for this one. You can't blame Joshua. You can't blame Wilder. There's only one person who's an outlying factor. The one man who is the common denominator in all of these things, and that's Tyson Fury and the people with him. How many times is it going to keep happening? I don't know. Is this going to happen if they fight a Joe Joyce? Even, you remember the Dillian White fight, even that took a while to go. For him, Fury doesn't fight nearly enough that he should have. He's not active enough, and I feel like at the moment, he's constantly involved in these long drawn-out sagas for fights, and that isn't good because eventually, Tyson Fury is a great heavyweight, the best in the world, but eventually, time will pass him by, and he will meet someone. Maybe it will be like an Cyril Anderson, or I'm not really that high on Daniel Dubois. Maybe it might be a Dubois. Who knows? Or even people might think crazy. Maybe some heavyweights do better later in their career. Maybe Anthony Joshua comes along and shows something. My point is, eventually, you're gonna almost be in the sidelines for too long. April 29th is supposedly the date, and that's still the date they're looking at. They're not looking at a new date. April 29th is very, very soon. In fact, it is, as of today when I'm recording this, it is a month and 7 days out. That is nowhere near enough time, in my opinion, to promote a fight of this magnitude, but We'll see. I don't personally think this fight will happen. I think the boat is sailed for this fight for now. Maybe it happens somewhere in the future. If Fury's not going to fight Usyk, I would like to see him fight a Joe Joyce. Usyk is obviously seemingly going to fight Daniel Dubois. The mandatories are going to take over. And even if even if the fight happens, he's involved in this too much Fury, and I just feel like this isn't good for his career or his image. Because ultimately, in the sport of fighting, your image is very important. There are some guys who I feel get away with murder in terms of, how often they fight, what they do, but the problem is sometimes they may come across in a way which people like them, and it can kind of get away with it in that sense, You look at someone like Daniel Dubois, for example. Quiet guy, don't really say much, but I remember him saying something about Joe Joyce's mum and him being blind and saying that she's not going to be able to see her son and all this kind of stuff. And it's a very dark comment, but because he's someone like Daniel Dubois, it's like people don't really pay much attention to it. And but then if you flip it, someone like Deontay Wilder, he literally said he wants a body on his record, but because he says he comes across as a savage guy, Wilder, he got investigated for it, but he kind of just about get away with it. It just depends on your image, and I think Fury, you don't want this image of being this guy who's difficult to negotiate with, who's ultimately labelled as someone who ducks fights. You don't want that, and I just think, to me, make this fight happen, because if not, I really struggle to see if this fight collapses, which it seems like it has. I don't really see, if you're Tyson Fury, what do you say? You could say, yeah, Fury. I mean, Usyk didn't accept the terms. Usyk didn't want the fight, but you can't say Usyk didn't want the fight. He's been calling this fight for ages, wanting the fight for ages. If you look at Fury's always been calling him a blown up middleweight, saying he's just too small and this and that. And then again, people often come up with the line of, if he's that bad or if he's not that good, why not fight him? But the problem that you got with this is that there's a lot of politics that go on in the sport, and Usyk had no problem making the fight with Anthony Joshua, first or second time. It was an easy fight to make. And yet, people love to go at Joshua and Eddie Hearn. But yet, when it's Tyson Fury, they are finding a very hard time to make this fight. Now, you could argue, it's different. These are two champions going at it. But Usyk is still Usyk. I can't imagine his demands. Yes, maybe he might want a higher percentage. But I don't think Usyk's not a guy who chases the money. I think it's clear to see this guy wants the undisputed belts. He wants every heavyweight title. And I don't doubt Fury does, but you heard Fury say many times he doesn't need the undisputed fight. He's already held every belt. When you just add everything up, look at all the fights and look at what they say, it only points into one direction to why this fight didn't get made. And it's because, once again, Tyson Fury and his team have made it very difficult. They made it difficult for Klitschko. He kept getting injured and pulling out, and the fight never happened. Wilder, it was set to fight, and they said, no, you need to get bigger. Joshua, it was all signed apparently, but the arbitration just came out of nowhere, even though it was always there. And now with Usyk, again, splits, rematch clauses. It's just always a circus with these sort of things, and this is again another reason why people often say boxing is in the gutter when these type of things, and why people always go up for the UFC, because these things don't happen. Now, I maintain both sports could learn something off each other, but I think one thing about boxing is when it comes to splits and rematch clauses, they aren't great. And personally, I think it's perfectly fair. I mean, the fact that it's a 70-30 split is a joke, considering Usyk holds majority of the belts in heavyweight division. Yes, Fury's a big name, but he's not. I don't think he's on a level of what a Mike Tyson was, or a Muhammad Ali, or what Floyd was. He's a big name, but let's not get it twisted. He's not an absolute megastar that I feel he can easily demand this and nobody have an issue with it. Or what Canelo is, for example. Now, he's not on the level, I think, of those guys, and I feel that's in terms of star power, and that's why I just struggle to sort of go along with. It's hard to sort of back Tyson Fury in these type of things. I like Tyson Fury; he's a great fighter, and he's been, I think, could go down as possibly the greatest heavyweight in this country. I think he actually, depending how you class Lennox Lewis, but him and Lennox, I think, are the two greatest heavyweights this country's seen. But I just think that you're at a point now. The more this keeps happening, the more his reputation, his name is going to be dragged further and further. And I think if you're Fury, you don't want that to happen. But I do hope that this fight happens, and I hope that they resolve this. But it ain't looking good. But yeah, just my thoughts on the Fury Usyk saga. get that fight signed April 29th. And yeah, until next time.